The high-pitched sound of the heart monitor cut through the silence of the emergency room at Seoul National University Hospital. Lee Won-ho, CEO of the LW Group, lay unconscious on the stretcher, his aristocratic face marked by small cuts caused by shrapnel from the windshield of his Mercedes-Benz. The accident on the Jeonbu Highway had been devastating, leaving its driver in critical condition and turning the luxury vehicle into a twisted mass of metal. Park Seo-yeon kept a close eye on the patient's vital signs as the medical team urgently moved around the bed. With 28 years and 5 years' experience as a nurse in the trauma unit, she had seen her fair share of serious cases, but there was something different about this one. Perhaps it was the way the man, even unconscious, maintained a commanding expression, or the fact that, for the last 20 minutes, his heart rate had been showing inexplicable patterns. "We need to stabilize him for surgery," ordered Dr. Kim Jae-sun, head of the neurosurgery team. "The head trauma is severe." As they prepared Won-ho for surgery, Seo-yeon noticed something peculiar. Whenever she approached him, his heartbeat would momentarily normalize. It was as if, even in his unconscious state, he responded to her presence. In the waiting room, Han Mayan, Won-ho's executive assistant, waited anxiously, her tablet held tightly against her chest. News of the accident had already spread through the media, and the LW Group shares were beginning to fluctuate dangerously. At 35, Won-ho had built a feared and respected corporate empire, but his reputation as the Ice Emperor preceded him. Known for his coolness in negotiations and for never showing emotion, he had turned a family business into a global conglomerate. During the surgery, which lasted 6 hours, a storm was raging in Seoul. Seo-yeon, who should have finished her shift, remained in the hospital. Something kept her from leaving, an intuition she couldn't explain. It was when Won-ho began to show post-operative complications that her decision to stay proved providential. She was the first to notice the subtle signs of internal bleeding, alerting the medical team in time for an intervention that saved his life. The next morning, when Won-ho finally opened his eyes, the world around him had changed dramatically. Voices, dozens of them, invaded his mind. They weren't sounds but thoughts as clear and distinct as if they had been spoken aloud. At first, he thought it was a side effect of the medication, but he soon realized that he could hear the innermost thoughts of every person who entered his room. "Mr. Lee needs to sign these documents by tomorrow," Mayan thought while smiling politely. "If he doesn't recover soon, we could lose the contract with the Chinese investors." "Another arrogant rich guy who thinks he can buy everyone," reflected one of the resident doctors, as he checked his vital signs with false cordiality. The mental cacophony was deafening until Seo-yeon entered the room. The silence was immediate. For the first time since waking up, Won-ho experienced peace. The only thoughts he could pick up from her were exactly the same as the words she spoke, pure, sincere, with no ulterior motives. "How are you feeling today, Mr. Lee?" she asked, adjusting the floor with precise, gentle movements. Won-ho watched her intently. In his years running one of Asia's largest companies, he had learned to distrust everyone. Every smile hid an agenda. Every gesture of kindness masked an interest. But here was someone whose thoughts and actions were perfectly aligned. In the days that followed, he found himself looking forward to Seo-yeon's visits. She didn't know who he was beyond his name and medical condition. She didn't watch the economic news and wasn't interested in the corporate world. To her, he was just another patient in need of care. During a particularly difficult early morning, when headaches caused by intrusive thoughts kept him awake, Seo-yeon appeared in his room outside of his normal hours. "I couldn't sleep wondering if you were all right," she admitted, and her thoughts echoed exactly the same concern. "I brought some chamomile tea that my grandmother always made when I couldn't sleep." It was at that moment that Won-ho realized how much danger he was in. Not because of the accident, not because of his new and inexplicable ability, but because of something much more frightening. He was beginning to care about someone other than himself. Across town, in his office on the top floor of the LW Tower, Young Hyun-woo, Won-ho's cousin and vice president of the group, smiled with satisfaction as he received the latest updates on the CEO's state of health. The accident had only just begun. Years of planning his rise to the presidency would not be wasted. If Won-ho was vulnerable, it was time to act. What neither of them knew was that fate had intertwined their lives in ways that not even the most sophisticated corporate strategy could have predicted. The gift Wonho had received would be both his greatest advantage and his greatest challenge. In a world where everyone lied, finding someone truthful was both a miracle and a threat. And for Seoyeon, whose life had always been guided by simplicity and honesty, meeting Wonho was about to prove that sometimes the greatest secrets are hidden in the most transparent hearts. In the first week after waking from his coma, Wonho discovered that his new ability was both a blessing and a curse. The thoughts of others invaded his mind like incessant waves, revealing truths he would rather not know. Board executives visited his room with warm smiles, while their minds overflowed with conspiracies and plans to take control of the company during his absence. Mayan, his assistant, remained faithfully at his side, but her thoughts were constantly preoccupied with business and deadlines. "If he doesn't recover soon, we'll lose the contract with Singapore," she repeated mentally as she organized documents on her tablet. Only Seoyeon provided moments of peace. During her visits, Wonho could relax, free from the mental cacophony that tormented him. She moved around the room with natural grace, checking his vital signs and adjusting medications, her thoughts perfectly aligned with her gentle actions. "You're progressing well," she commented one morning, examining his tests, "but your blood pressure is still a little high. Are you feeling anxious?" If she only knew, thought Wonho, how could he explain that every visit from a council member was torture? That every false smile had calculating thoughts that echoed in his mind? "Just preoccupied with work," he replied, studying her serene face. In his office in the LW Tower, young Hyunwoo was conducting an extraordinary board meeting. "With Lee Wonho hospitalized, we need to consider temporary leadership measures," he argued, his eyes shining with ill-concealed ambition. Wonho received the news through Mayan's worried thoughts. His cousin was moving pieces on the corporate board, taking advantage of his absence. Anger consumed him, but it also brought a revelation. His new gift could be a powerful weapon in the power games that awaited him. During physiotherapy, Seoyeon would occasionally accompany him, her firm hands helping him through the exercises. During one of these sessions, she shared something personal. "You know, I also went through a difficult time last year. I lost my grandmother who raised me. I learned that sometimes we need to accept help from others in order to recover." The sincerity in her words and thoughts touched Wonho in a way he hadn't experienced for years. Since taking over the presidency of the LW Group at the age of 30, he had built up emotional walls, turning himself into the Ice Emperor. Now those walls were beginning to melt under the warmth of Seoyeon's genuine kindness. One night, while working on his laptop in his hospital room, Wonho caught disturbing thoughts of a doctor passing in the corridor. The man was planning to alter test results in exchange for a bribe. The discovery made him realize that his gift could serve a greater purpose than just business advantage. "Did something happen?" asked Seoyeon, noticing his tense expression as he entered the room. "Nothing important," he lied, feeling guilty for not being able to share the truth with the only person he had proven to be genuinely trustworthy. The days turned into weeks, and Wonho's recovery progressed rapidly. His body grew stronger, but his mind was in constant turmoil. The thoughts of the people around him revealed a web of lies and manipulation that extended far beyond the hospital. Hyunwoo visited him just once, bringing an elaborate flower arrangement. "Cousin, we're all rooting for your recovery," he said with a smile, while his thoughts screamed, "The longer he stays here, the more chance I have of consolidating my position." After the visit, Wonho remained restless. Seoyeon, noticing his agitation, brought him some herbal tea. "Sometimes the best medicine is to have someone to talk to," she offered, taking a seat beside his bed. At that moment, watching her, Wonho made a decision. He needed to protect not only his business interests, but also this rare genuine soul that fate had placed in his path. The corporate world was ruthless, and his cousin would not hesitate to use any means to achieve his goals. "Seoyeon," he called softly, "why did you choose to be a nurse?" She smiled, her thoughts flowing with warm memories. "My grandmother always said that healing isn't just about medicines, but about being there for someone in their most vulnerable moments." The answer hit him like a revelation. In his quest for power and control, he had forgotten the value of genuine human connection. Now, gifted with the ability to see through social masks, he found himself paradoxically more alone than ever, except in the presence of this woman who had nothing to hide. Outside the hospital, Seoul pulsed with its characteristic energy. The skyscrapers of the financial district, including the imposing LW Tower, reflected the setting sun. Won-ho watched the city from his bedroom window, aware that he would soon return to that world of appearances and power games. But now, equipped with his extraordinary gift and strengthened by Seoyeon's presence, he was ready to face the battles that awaited him. What he didn't yet know was that his greatest challenge would not be in the corporate corridors of LW Tower, but in his own heart, where a battle between power and love was just beginning to unfold. The evening light streamed through the windows of room 1507 as Won-ho signed his discharge papers. After 3 weeks in hospital, he was finally returning to the outside world. His new gift had become more manageable, although it still surprised him at unexpected moments. "Remember to strictly follow the doctor's recommendations," said Seoyeon, adjusting his monitors for the last time. Her thoughts, as always, mirrored his words exactly, adding only genuine concern for his well-being. As Mayan organized her exit, Won-ho caught fragments of a disturbing mental conversation in the corridor. 2 doctors were discussing in their minds a hospital equipment overcharging scheme. Dr. Kim Jae-sun, who had performed his surgery, was involved. "Mr. Lee, your car is waiting," Mayan announced, his thoughts revealing concern about a board meeting scheduled for the next day. Before leaving, Won-ho looked at Seoyeon one last time. She smiled, and in his mind echoed only the sincere wish that he would recover completely. The simplicity of her thoughts made him question his whole world of complex corporate manipulations. At the LW Tower, young Hyun-woo received an unexpected visitor. Seo Yuri, Won-ho's ex-fiancé and the current marketing director of a rival conglomerate, walked into his office with the elegance of a predator. "I hear your cousin is being discharged today," she commented, her heels echoing on the marble floor. "Interesting timing, considering our recent discussions." Yuri's thoughts were a whirlwind of ambition and resentment. Won-ho had left her 3 years earlier when he discovered her attempt to sell confidential information to competitors. Now she planned her revenge through Hyun-woo. In her penthouse apartment in the Lotte World Tower, Won-ho was trying to readjust to her routine. The thoughts of the building staff were a constant din of gossip and speculation about his condition. His private chef was planning to raise prices while feigning concern about his diet. An unexpected message lit up his cell phone. It was Seoyeon, asking how his first night at home was going. The simplicity of the gesture touched him deeply. The next morning, as he entered the LW Tower for the first time since the accident, Won-ho was bombarded by an avalanche of thoughts. Employees feigned joy at seeing him, while their minds revealed fear, envy and calculations of how they could benefit from his return. During the board meeting, his gift proved invaluable. Every false smile, every show of support hid secret plans and alliances. Hyun-woo had gained considerable influence during his absence. "Cousin, it's good to have you back," said Hyun-woo, his thoughts betraying his frustration at Won-ho's premature return. At night, unable to sleep with so many revelations, Won-ho drove to Han River Park. To his surprise, he found Seoyeon sitting on a bench, still wearing her nurse's uniform. "Mr. Lee?" she asked in surprise. "Shouldn't you be resting? Sometimes silence is the best medicine," he replied, taking a seat next to her. For the first time in days, his mind found peace. Seoyeon shared that she had just finished a difficult shift. A terminally ill patient had died, and she always allowed herself a moment of reflection after such losses. Her genuine compassion was a balm for Won-ho's tormented soul. The next day, discreetly investigating the corruption scheme he had uncovered at the hospital, Won-ho found disturbing connections. Dr. Kim Jae-sung had links to a medical equipment company controlled by a subsidiary of the rival group where Yuri worked. Mayan entered his office with new concerns. "Mr. Lee, there are rumors of a possible hostile merger being planned," she said, her thoughts revealing more details than her words. Won-ho realized that he was at the center of a much larger web of conspiracies than he had imagined. His accident might not have been that accidental. During a routine follow-up visit to the hospital, Won-ho found Seoyeon caring for a child with leukemia. Her thoughts were focused on how to make the treatment less frightening for the little patient. "Sometimes I wonder how you keep such kindness in a place full of pain," he commented. "Each person has their own battle," she replied, unaware of how much her words resonated with Won-ho's current situation. The important thing is not to lose your humanity in the process. That night in his office, Won-ho began to draw up a plan. Using his gift, he could expose the corruption in the hospital and dismantle the conspiracies against his company. But each new piece of knowledge brought him closer to a moral dilemma. How far would he go to protect what was his? Seo-yeon represented everything he had forgotten in his quest for power: compassion, honesty, the ability to see beauty in simplicity. His new gift had revealed a world of lies, but it had also led him to her. As night fell over Seoul, Won-ho watched the city through his office window. Somewhere downstairs, Seo-yeon was probably starting another night shift, bringing comfort to strangers. And there, at the top of his corporate empire, he wondered if all his power and influence were worth the loneliness that came with them. The sound of his cell phone brought him back to reality. It was a message from an unknown number. "We know about your new skill. Meet me tomorrow at Namsan Tower at 3 p.m. The sender was anonymous, but the thoughts Won-ho picked up from the security guard passing in the corridor at the time suggested that Hyun-woo was not alone in his conspiracy. The anonymous message about his supernatural gift tormented Won-ho throughout the night. Sitting in his penthouse office, he obsessively reviewed the security cameras from the day of the accident, looking for any details he might have missed. Mayan hurried into the room, his thoughts in turmoil. "Mr. Lee, we've discovered something about the accident. The car's brake system showed signs of tampering." Her thoughts revealed more. The private investigation team had found traces of professional sabotage, the kind of work that only someone with considerable resources could afford. Before going to the appointment at Namsan Tower, Won-ho made an unscheduled stop at the hospital. He needed to verify a suspicion about Dr. Kim Jae-sun. As he passed the nursing ward, he found Seo-yeon organizing medical records. "Mr. Lee, I didn't expect to see you today," she smiled, her thoughts genuinely happy at the unexpected encounter. "Are you feeling well?" "I've never been better," she lied, feeling the weight of guilt for not being able to share her true motives. Through his gift, he picked up a close mental conversation between two doctors discussing a patient who had died suspiciously, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. In the elevator of Namsan Tower at 2:55 p.m., Won-ho adjusted his Hermes tie, mentally preparing himself for the confrontation. The place was surprisingly empty for a Thursday afternoon. In the observatory, a familiar figure awaited him. "Seo Yuri, your ability to read minds must have made the council meetings much more interesting," she said bluntly. Her thoughts were a mixture of bitterness and satisfaction at having managed to surprise him. "How did you?" he began, but her thoughts were already revealing the answer. "Dr. Kim Jae-sung is not just a brilliant neurosurgeon," Yuri continued. "He's been conducting secret experiments for Nexus Corp's Advanced Neuroscience Division for years. His accident was, let's say, a happy coincidence that allowed us to test something new. The revelation hit him like a punch. Nexus Corp was LW Group's main rival, and Hyun-woo had recently tried to establish a partnership with them without his knowledge." In his apartment that evening, Won-ho received an unexpected visitor. Seo-yeon had shown up after her shift, concerned about his expression earlier at the hospital. "I brought you some kimchi soup," she said, holding up a bag. "My grandmother always said that it feeds not only the body, but also the soul." The simplicity of the gesture contrasted dramatically with the conspiracies that surrounded it. As they shared the meal, Won-ho captured fragmented memories flashing through Seo-yeon's mind: her humble childhood, the loss of her parents, her grandmother's unconditional love. "Why do you care so much?" he asked suddenly. "With patience with people you barely know?" "Because everyone deserves to have someone who truly cares," she replied, her thoughts perfectly aligned with his words. "Even those who seem to have everything." The next morning, Won-ho called an emergency meeting with his security team. Yuri's revelations needed to be investigated, but with extreme caution. Nexus Corp was not known for playing fair, and now he knew that they were capable of advanced neurological manipulation. During the meeting, his thoughts kept returning to Seo-yeon. She represented everything he had lost in his rise to power: purity of intent, the ability to trust, to genuinely care. Now, more than ever, he needed to protect her from the approaching shadows. At the hospital, Dr. Kim Jae-sung received a visit from Hyun-woo. Won-ho had planted a listening device in his office, and the thoughts it picked up from a distance confirmed his worst suspicions. The neurological experiment was no accident. It was part of a larger plan to take control of the LW group. Meanwhile, Seoyeon was facing her own challenges. An elderly patient under her care had revealed worrying information about questionable practices at the hospital. Her integrity impelled her to investigate, unaware that she was getting dangerously close to the same web of conspiracies that enveloped Wonho. At night, in her office in the LW Tower, Wonho was analyzing documents when she caught familiar thoughts in the hallway. Seoyeon had come to deliver his latest test results in person, worried about subtle changes that others might have overlooked. "There's something not right about these numbers," she said, pointing to the analyzers. Her instinct as an experienced nurse had detected anomalies that could indicate side effects from the neurological experiment. Looking at her in the soft light of the office, Wonho felt the weight of his choices. Every moment he spent by her side made him question the walls he had built around himself, the price he had paid for power, and the real value of the things he had always considered important. On the other side of town, Yuri and Hyunwoo were planning their next move, unaware that their every thought was now an open book to Wonho. The game was just beginning, and the stakes were higher than anyone could have imagined. The revelation about Nexus Corp's neurological experiment changed everything for Wonho. In his office in the LW Tower, he was examining confidential documents about the Advanced Neuroscience Division, while the thoughts of the employees on the floor below echoed like a distant hum in his mind. Mayan hurried in, his thoughts on alert. "Mr. Lee, Nexus Corp has just announced a takeover bid for our minority shares." The news didn't surprise him. Through his gift, he had already picked up fragments of this information in the thoughts of several executives over the last few days. What worried him was the increasingly clear connection between Hyunwoo, Yuri and Dr. Kim Jae-sun. At the hospital, Seoyeon was discreetly investigating the irregularities she had discovered. During her shift, she found medical records with suspicious discrepancies, all related to patients of Dr. Kim Jae-sun. Her search for answers led her to the basement of the hospital, where the old files were kept. "Miss Park, you shouldn't be here," said a deep voice. It was Dr. Kim, his cold eyes fixed on her. Wonho, who was visiting the hospital for a checkup, picked up the doctor's threatening thoughts from a distance. "Sorry, doctor. I was just organizing some files," lied Seoyeon, her heart racing. Wonho arrived in the archive corridor at just the right moment, interrupting the tension. "Dr. Kim, what a coincidence. I just needed to talk to you about my latest tests." The doctor's thoughts revealed momentary panic, worry about compromising documents, and a missed call from Hyunwoo. Seoyeon took advantage of the distraction to leave, but not before exchanging a meaningful glance with Wonho. That evening, in his Gangnam apartment, Wonho received an unexpected visitor. Seo Yuri appeared without warning, her thoughts a mixture of a desire for revenge and something more complex, regret. "The experiment wasn't supposed to work," she confessed, surprising him. "It was just to incapacitate you temporarily, to give Hyunwoo time to take control. No one expected you to develop skills." Meanwhile, Seoyeon was facing her own disturbing discoveries. An elderly patient, Mr. Khan, had confided in her about experimental treatments carried out without consent. Her thoughts about protecting vulnerable patients resonated with Wonho's own protective nature. "Mississippi Park," Mr. Khan called out weakly. "There's something I need to show you." From under his pillow, he pulled out a USB stick. "My son worked at Nexus Corp before the accident." The next day, during a tense board meeting, Wonho used his gift to map out alliances and betrayals. Every fake smile, every cordial handshake hid a web of lies that he could now clearly see. "Nexus Corp's offer is generous," argued Hyunwoo, his thoughts revealing secret deals and promises of power. "We should seriously consider it." In the evening, Wonho found Seoyeon in Han River Park, her place of refuge. She looked worried, hugging her bag where she kept Mr. Kang's USB stick. "There's something wrong at the hospital," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Patients are being used as guinea pigs without knowing it." Her thoughts were as pure as ever, focused only on protecting the innocent. Wonho felt a pang of guilt for not being able to reveal everything he knew, for not being able to fully protect her from the approaching shadows. The next morning, a series of events unfolded quickly. Mr. Kong was found in critical condition, the victim of an unexpected complication. Dr. Kim Jae-sung's thoughts, picked up by Won-ho during his visit to the hospital, revealed panic and direct orders from Hyun-woo. Seo-yeon, determined to expose the truth, began compiling evidence. Her meticulous notes, combined with the information on the USB stick, formed a devastating dossier on the illegal experiments. In his office, Won-ho received another piece of the puzzle. Mayan discovered that Nexus Corp had registered patents related to induced neural alteration months before his accident. Everything is connected, he thought, watching the city through the window. His gift, initially a curse, had become his greatest weapon in the fight against those who tried to destroy him. In the evening, at a traditional restaurant in Insadong, Won-ho had dinner with Seo-yeon. Her simplicity, her genuine concern for others, was a stark contrast to the world of manipulation in which he lived. "Sometimes I wonder," she said, fiddling with her bibimbap, "why people with so much power choose to hurt rather than help." Her words struck Won-ho deeply. In his quest for revenge and control, he had forgotten the true purpose of power, the ability to make a difference in people's lives. Won-ho's cell phone vibrated with the message from Yuri. "We need to talk. Hyun-woo is not who you think he is." Her thoughts, picked up from a distance, suggested that she was about to reveal something that would change everything. The meeting with Yuri took place in the luxurious restaurant on the top floor of the Four Seasons Seoul. Through the scattered thoughts of the other customers, Won-ho picked up fragments of admiration for her beauty, but his own thoughts were focused on the revelations to come. "Nexus Corp isn't just behind LW Group," began Yuri, swirling his glass of red wine. "The neurological experiment is part of a much bigger project. Hyun-woo is just a pawn." Her thoughts revealed more. Secret documents, clandestine meetings in Tokyo, and a name that made Won-ho freeze Park Jin-woo, Seo-yeon's father, presumed dead 15 years ago. At the hospital, Seo-yeon was organizing the evidence she had collected about the illegal experiments when an older nurse, Mrs. Kim, approached with a worried expression. "Honey, I found something you need to see," she whispered, handing her a yellowed file. It was a record from 15 years ago, detailing an accident involving a researcher called Park Jin-woo. Won-ho, on returning to his office, found Mayan in a state of agitation. "Mr. Lee, we've discovered that Nexus Corp has been making substantial deposits into an offshore account linked to Dr. Kim Jae-sung for the past 5 years." Her thoughts revealed more details. The deposits began just as the first neurological experiments were started. In her apartment that night, Seo-yeon couldn't sleep. The discoveries about her father consumed her. According to the records, he had not died in a car accident as she had been told, but in an incident in the Nexus Corporation laboratory. Won-ho, monitoring Dr. Kim's thoughts from a distance, picked up something alarming. The doctor was planning to deal with Seo-yeon, who was getting too close to the truth. Without a second thought, he drove to her apartment. "We need to talk," he said when he found her still awake. "You're in danger?" Seo-yeon's modest apartment, located in a quiet neighborhood of Seoul, contrasted dramatically with Won-ho's luxurious penthouse. As she prepared tea, her thoughts were a mixture of worry and determination. "My father," she began, "worked on something called Project Aurora at Nexus Corporation. Records show that he died the same day he supposedly discovered something irregular." Won-ho felt his heart squeeze. Through his gift, he could feel the genuine pain in her every word, every memory of his father that resurfaced. The next morning, a series of events unfolded quickly. Mr. Kong, still in critical condition, began to show signs of recovery, and his thoughts, although weak, revealed crucial information about the Aurora project. Hyun-woo, in his office in the LW Tower, received an unexpected visit from executives from Nexus Corporation. Won-ho, through the security cameras and his gift, observed the meeting from a distance. "The experiment with your cousin was just the beginning," thought one of the executives. "The real test is yet to come." During his shift at the hospital, Seo-yeon noticed strange behaviors in Dr. Kim's other patients. They all showed neurological patterns similar to Won-ho's after the accident. "Something is very wrong here," she thought, meticulously documenting her observations. In a cafe near the hospital, Won-ho met Yuri again. She had brought with her an old folder with the Nexus Corp logo. Park Jin-woo discovered that Project Aurora wasn't about improving the human mind, she revealed. It was about controlling it. Her thoughts showed images of secret laboratories, failed experiments, and most disturbingly, a list of successes, people who had developed similar abilities to Wonho. Back at the hospital, Seoyeon found something even more alarming. In the oldest archives, there were records of patients who displayed inexplicable abilities after seemingly routine procedures. All the cases had been supervised by the same doctor, Dr. Kim Jae-sun. Wonho, using his gift, realized that he was being followed. The stalker's thoughts revealed connections to Nexus Corp and specific orders to monitor his interactions with Seoyeon. At night, in his apartment, he received another piece of the puzzle. Mayan discovered that Park Jin-woo had tried to contact the press days before his death. The Aurora Project isn't just about reading minds, thought Wonho, connecting the dots. It's about creating a network of mentally connected people, controlled by a central core. Seoyeon, without knowing it, was getting dangerously close to the center of this web of conspiracies. Her search for the truth about her father put her directly in the path of those who would do anything to keep their secrets buried. Sometimes the truth is scarier than a lie, her grandmother had said years ago. Now, those words echoed in her mind as she prepared to face revelations that would change her life forever. The discoveries about the Aurora Project and the connection to Seoyeon's father completely changed the dynamics of the investigation. Wonho, in his office at the LW Tower, analyzed the documents Yuri had provided while trying to filter the cacophony of thoughts that invaded his mind. Mr. Lee, Mayan rushed in, his thoughts on alert. We've just received information about a secret meeting between Hyunwoo and executives from Nexus Corp in Busan. The records indicated that the meeting would take place in a traditional seafood restaurant near the port of Busan. Wonho knew he needed to be there, but he was also worried about Seoyeon's safety. At the hospital, Seoyeon was continuing her discreet investigation into Dr. Kim's experiments. During her night shift, she found more disturbing evidence in the medical files. All the patients who had developed special abilities had received a specific experimental treatment. Miss Park, a deep voice surprised her. It was Dr. Park Miho, a veteran neurosurgeon who had worked with her father. I've been waiting a long time for someone to start asking the right questions. The doctor's thoughts, which Wonho picked up even from the LW Tower, revealed an even more complex story. Dr. Park Miho had witnessed Park Jin-woo's last days. Wonho decided to act quickly. He organized an emergency trip to Busan, but first, he needed to ensure Seoyeon's safety. Using his gift, he discovered that Dr. Kim planned to neutralize any threat to the project in the next 48 hours. At a cafe near the hospital, Wonho met up with Seoyeon. The place was relatively empty, allowing him to better filter out the surrounding thoughts. I need you to come with me to Busan, he said, watching her reaction. There's something you need to see about your father. Her thoughts were a mixture of surprise, fear, and determination. Why are you so involved in all this? She asked, her eyes searching for answers he couldn't yet fully provide. On the journey from KTX to Busan, Wonho had shared some of what he knew about the Aurora Project, omitting only his own condition. Seoyeon listened attentively, her childhood memories with her father taking on new meanings with each revelation. In Busan, they stayed in different hotels so as not to arouse suspicion. Wonho set up a base of operations in his suite at the Park Hyatt, while Seoyeon stayed in a more discreet hotel in the Haeundae district. During the afternoon, Mayan sent more crucial information. Nexus Corp is moving large sums to offshore accounts. His thoughts revealed genuine concern. Something big is about to happen. In the evening, before the secret meeting, Wonho met Seoyeon on Haeundae Beach. The sound of the waves provided temporary relief for his mind, which was constantly invaded by other people's thoughts. My father used to bring me here when I was little, she said, looking at the horizon. He used to say that the sea holds all the secrets of the world. Wonho caught thoughts approaching, Nexus Corp security men making their rounds. Instinctively, he pulled Seoyeon behind a closed kiosk, their bodies close in the darkness. In the traditional restaurant, Hyunwoo was meeting with 3 executives from Nexus Corporation. Wonho, sitting discreetly at a distant table, absorbed every thought of the conversation. Project Aurora is entering its final phase, thought one of the executives. With the neural network in place, we will be able to control not just individual minds, but create a controlled collective consciousness. The implications were terrifying. Wonho's accident had not been an isolated experiment. It was part of a larger plan to create a network of mentally connected people, controlled by a central hub at Nexus Corporation. Seoyeon, who was waiting in a nearby cafe, received a message from Dr. Park Mi-ho with more information about her father. Your father found out that the project had devastating ethical implications. He tried to warn us. Wonho sensed hostile thoughts approaching the cafe. Using his gift, he identified two men from Nexus Corp who had followed Seoyeon from Seoul. He quickly left the restaurant and ran to the cafe. He found Seoyeon leaving through the back door, following instructions he had given earlier in case something went wrong. The narrow streets of Busan became a maze as they fled. Thoughts of the pursuers echoed in Wonho's mind, allowing him to guide Seoyeon along the safest routes. In an alley near the fish market, they finally lost their pursuers. Gasping, Seoyeon looked at Wonho with a mixture of fear and confidence. "How did you know they were coming?" she asked. Wonho realized that he could no longer hide the truth. The Aurora project, his father's death, his own condition. Everything was connected, and Seoyeon deserved to know. "There's something I need to tell you," he began, as the last rays of the sun tinted the Busan sky orange. "About the accident, about your father, and about what really happened to me in the hospital." Her thoughts were as clear as ever: concern, curiosity, and above all, an unshakable trust in him that made him question everything he had built in his life up to that point. On the roof of an old building in Busan, Wonho finally revealed his secret to Seoyeon. The sea wind gently ruffled her hair as she absorbed every word about the supernatural ability he had developed after the accident. "Ever since I woke up in hospital, I've been able to hear people's thoughts," he confessed, watching her reaction carefully. "All except yours." Seoyeon's eyes widened at the revelation, but there was no fear in her expression, only gradual understanding of all the inexplicable moments they had shared. "That's why you always seemed to know when something was wrong," she murmured, connecting the dots. "That's why you managed to get us out of that situation at the cafe." Before they could talk further, Wonho's cell phone vibrated with an urgent message from Mayan. Nexus Corp had called an extraordinary shareholders meeting for the following day in Seoul. On the way back to the hotel, Seoyeon shared Dr. Park Mi-ho's findings about her father. He discovered that Project Aurora wasn't just about creating telepathic abilities, she explained. It was about mass mind control. Wonho picked up suspicious thoughts from a hotel employee as they walked through the lobby. Discreetly, he guided Seoyeon to a side exit. The Nexus Corp men were still looking for them. In a small traditional restaurant near the port, they continued their conversation. The place was almost empty, allowing Wonho to better filter out the surrounding thoughts. "Your father was developing a neural blocker," he revealed, based on the documents Yuri had shared. "Something that could protect people from the Aurora Project's mind control." Seoyeon's eyes filled with tears. That's why he'd been spending so much time in the lab over the last few days. He was trying to protect us. On the train back to Seoul, Wonho realized that he needed to make crucial decisions. Thoughts picked up during the meeting in Busan indicated that Nexus Corp was planning to implement the final phase of the project soon. "How do you deal with that?" asked Seoyeon softly. "Hearing everyone's thoughts all the time? It's deafening at times," he admitted. "But with you it's silence. A comforting silence." In Seoul, they discovered that Dr. Kim Jae-sun had disappeared from the hospital. His personal files had been deleted and his office was completely empty. Mayan met them at Wonho's office in the LW Tower. "Mr. Lee, we found out something about the neural blocker," she said, her thoughts revealing urgency. Dr. Park Mi-ho managed to recover some of Seoyeon's father's original research. The notes showed that Park Jin-woo had managed to develop a working prototype of the blocker. The device was never found after his death, but his notes suggested that he had hidden it in a safe place. "He used to take me to a Buddhist temple in the mountains," Seoyeon recalled. "He said it was our special place, where we kept our secrets." Wonho picked up worrying thoughts from executives a few floors below. Nexus Corp was mobilizing a team to locate the jammer before they did. "We need to get to the temple first," he decided. "But Hyunwoo is certainly monitoring my movements." Seoyeon had an idea. "My grandmother used to say that sometimes the best hiding place is right in plain sight." They devised a plan. While Wonho would ostentatiously attend the shareholders' meeting, attracting the main attention, Seoyeon and Dr. Park Miho would go to the temple to pick up the blocker. That night, in his apartment, Wonho couldn't sleep. The thoughts of the security guards in the building revealed that he was being watched. Through his gift, he picked up fragments of mental conversations that suggested that Nexus Corp had developed an improved version of the experiment that had given him his powers. Seoyeon visited him late at night, bringing old documents she had found at her grandmother's house. "I found letters from my father," she said. He mentioned a vault in the temple, behind the main altar. As they examined the letters, Wonho noticed something crucial. The patterns on the letters, seemingly random, formed specific coordinates within the temple. "Your father was brilliant," he marveled. He hid the instructions in code, knowing that one day someone would need to find them. Seoyeon's closeness calmed him, silencing the constant invasion of other people's thoughts. In a moment of vulnerability, their gazes met, charged with something deeper than just partnership in their investigation. "Why can't you hear my thoughts?" she asked softly. "Maybe," he replied. "Some people are naturally immune. Or maybe." Before she could finish, she picked up alarming thoughts from the security guard in the lobby. Hyunwoo was on his way. "You need to go," he whispered urgently. "Use the emergency exit." After his departure, Wonho stared at the illuminated city through his window. Tomorrow would be the decisive day. The shareholders' meeting, the search for the jammer, the inevitable confrontation with Hyunwoo and Nexus Corporation. In her small apartment, Seoyeon was also awake, rereading her father's letters. One sentence stood out. "True power lies not in controlling minds but in freeing hearts." The dawn would bring not just a new day, but the start of a battle that would determine the future of countless lives. And at the center of it all, a CEO with the gift of reading minds, and a nurse whose thoughts remained a mystery would find the strength in each other to face what was to come. The sun had barely risen when Wonho arrived at LW Tower for the shareholders' meeting. His gift picked up a chaotic mix of thoughts coming from the main lobby. Ambition, fear, expectation. Nexus Corp had strategically positioned its allies among those present. Meanwhile, Seoyeon and Dr. Park Miho were driving to Bonjunsa Temple in the mountains outside Seoul. The winding road brought back memories of her childhood. Happy days with her father before the Aurora Project changed everything. "Your father was an extraordinary man," commented Dr. Park Miho, his eyes fixed on the road. He foresaw that something like this would happen, that people would try to use his research for control instead of benefit. In the meeting room on the 50th floor, Wonho faced Hyunwoo and the executives of Nexus Corporation. Their thoughts were a symphony of betrayal and greed, plans within plans. "As you can see from the figures," Hyunwoo presented, "the merger with Nexus Corp represents a unique opportunity for growth." Wonho caught a disturbing thought from one of the executives. "As soon as control is transferred, we'll start the Omega phase of the project. Seoul will only be the beginning." At the temple, Seoyeon and Dr. Park Miho were greeted by an elderly monk who immediately recognized Park Jin-woo's daughter. "Your father used to meditate here for hours," he said, guiding them through the ancient corridors. Using the coordinates encoded on the letters, they began to search for the secret vault. Dr. Park Miho's thoughts, which Wonho was able to pick up even from a distance thanks to his strengthened bond with Seoyeon, revealed a growing concern for time. At the meeting, Wonho played a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Every proposal, every argument was carefully calculated to buy time. Through his gift, he realized that some shareholders were beginning to question Nexus Corp's true intentions. "Before any decision is made," Wonho argued, "we need to consider the ethical implications of this merger." Mayan, strategically positioned in the room, sent discreet updates on Seoyeon's progress via messages encoded in her thoughts, knowing that Wonho would pick them up. At the temple, after hours of meticulous searching, Seoyeon found a loose stone behind the main altar. Inside was a metal box with the infinity symbol engraved on it, the hallmark of her father's research. "The neural blocker," whispered Dr. Park Miho, his hands shaking as he opened the box. Inside, in addition to the device, was a letter addressed to Seoyeon. "My dear daughter," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means that my suspicions about Project Aurora were correct. The blocker is the key to preventing them from using my research to control innocent minds." In the LW Tower, tension was at its peak. Hyunwoo, realizing that he was losing ground, decided to play his last card. What would the shareholders say, he teased, if they knew that their CEO had developed extraordinary skills after his accident? A heavy silence fell over the room. Wonho sensed shock waves in the thoughts of those present. But before Hyunwoo could continue, an alert sounded on all the cell phones. Nexus Corp had started a mass transmission through all of Seoul's communication networks. Specific brainwaves, disguised as software updates, were beginning to affect the population. At the temple, Seoyeon and Dr. Park Miho were racing against time to understand how the blocker worked. Park Jin-woo's instructions were complex but precise. "The device needs to be connected to the main transmission tower," explained Dr. Park Miho. "Only then will we be able to interrupt the Nexus Corporation signal." Wonho, realizing the seriousness of the situation, decided to reveal all. He stood up in the meeting room and, for the first time, used his gift openly. "Yes, I can read minds," he declared, causing a stir. "And I can prove that Nexus Corp is trying to mentally control the population of Seoul right now." To demonstrate, he began to reveal the secret thoughts of each Nexus Corp executive present, exposing their true intentions. Seoyeon and Dr. Park Miho arrived at Seoul's main transmission tower. The site was heavily guarded, but they had an advantage. Wonho could guide them through the thoughts of the security guards. "To your right in 3 seconds, he thought intensely, hoping that somehow Seoyeon would sense his guidance. To his surprise, she turned at exactly the right moment. As if she had heard him, an inexplicable connection had formed between them, transcending even the limits of their supernatural gift. With the neural blocker in hand, Seoyeon now faced the biggest challenge: reaching the transmission center before Nexus Corp's mind control became irreversible. The fate of Seoul, and perhaps the world, depended on a race against time, where love, truth, and mental freedom were at stake. And at the center of it all, a CEO with the power to read minds, and a nurse whose thoughts remained a mystery, would need to trust each other more than ever. Chaos gripped Seoul as the Nexus Corp signal spread across the city. On the streets, people were beginning to behave strangely, their gazes vacant, and their movements mechanical. Wonho, still in the meeting room of the LW Tower, noticed a disturbing change in the thoughts around him. They were starting to become uniform, as if several minds were being tuned into the same frequency. "What have you done?" he asked, staring at Hyunwoo and the Nexus Corporation executives. "We just accelerated the natural evolution of society," replied one of the executives, his cold smile contrasting with his chaotic thoughts. "A collective mind perfectly synchronized." In the transmission tower, Seoyeon and Dr. Park Miho were facing their own challenges. The security guards, already under the influence of the signal, moved like automatons towards them. The neural blocker weighed on Seoyeon's backpack, like a constant reminder of the responsibility they carried. "We need to get to the 45th floor," explained Dr. Park Miho, consulting Seoyeon's father's notes. "That's where the central transmission hub is." Mayan, still immune to the signal thanks to an early prototype of the jammer that Wonho had provided, coordinated the resistance from the LW Tower. Via a secure network, she kept in touch with a small team of trusted people scattered around the city. The effects of the signal seemed to intensify by the minute, she reported to Wonho through her thoughts. "We're losing people fast." In the meeting room, Wonho decided to use his gift more aggressively. Concentrating intensely, he began to project memories and thoughts onto the executives present. Memories of family, moments of humanity, anything to break the control that was beginning to settle over their minds. "Stop resisting," ordered Hyunwoo, his voice taking on an unnatural metallic tone. "The age of the single mind is beginning." In the elevator of the transmission tower, Seoyeon held tightly to the device created by her father. Each floor they climbed increased the tension. Dr. Park Miho typed frantically on his tablet, trying to decipher the latest instructions left by Park Jin-woo. "Your father saw this coming," he told Seoyeon. He knew that eventually they would try to use the Aurora project in this way. The jammer isn't just a protective device, it's a key to reversing the whole process. Wonho picked up on a crucial thought from one of Nexus Corp's younger executives: a weakness in the system. The signal needed specific amplifiers to maintain its strength. Destroying them could buy precious time. Mayan, he mentally projected, knowing that she was tuned into his thoughts. Locate the amplifiers. We need to take them down. In his small makeshift command center, Mayan coordinated teams to attack the strategic points. The city had become a silent battlefield, where the real fighting was taking place in people's minds. Seoyeon and Dr. Park Miho finally reached the 45th floor, only to find a surreal scene. Dozens of technicians were working in perfect sync, their minds already completely controlled by the signal. In the center of the room, a crystalline structure pulsed with energy, the core of the transmission system. "That's where we need to install the jammer," said Dr. Park Miho. "But we need to be precise. A mistake could amplify the signal instead of neutralizing it." At the LW Tower, Wonho faced an increasingly difficult battle. Even with his gift, staying conscious was becoming a challenge. The thoughts around him were like a rising tide, threatening to drown him in uniformity. "Why do you keep fighting?" asked Hyunwoo, stepping closer. "Think of the power we'd have together, controlling not just companies but minds." For a moment, Wonho felt his resolve waver. The power on offer was tempting: absolute control, an end to conflict through mental uniformity. Then, like a beacon in the darkness, he thought of Seoyeon. In her silent mind, in her untouched humanity, in everything she stood for. In the transmission tower, Seoyeon was preparing for the most dangerous part of the plan. While Dr. Park Miho created a distraction, she would approach the core with the jammer. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her determination was unwavering. "Dad," she whispered, holding the device, "give me strength." The decisive moment was approaching. In different parts of the city, a silent battle for humanity's mental freedom was reaching its climax. The future of Seoul, and perhaps the world, depended on the next actions of a CEO with the power to read minds, and a nurse whose thoughts remained a mystery to everyone except her own determined heart. The mental chaos spreading through Seoul created surreal patterns of behavior on the streets. From the top of the transmission tower, Seoyeon watched the city she loved so much turn into a dystopian experiment. With the neural blocker in her hands, she cautiously approached the transmission core, each step echoing in the unnatural silence of the environment. "Access codes are changing rapidly," warned Dr. Park Miho, his fingers dancing over the tablet. "Nexus Corp must have noticed our presence." In the LW Tower, Wonho struggled against the signal's growing influence. His ability to read minds was becoming a double curse. As well as picking up individual thoughts, he now felt the oppressive presence of the collective consciousness that Nexus Corp was trying to impose. "Don't you see the beauty in that?" teased Hyunwoo, his eyes shining with an artificial glow. "A society without discord, without internal conflict?" Mayan, protected by the prototype jammer, was coordinating the last resistance team still conscious. 3 amplifiers have been neutralized, she reported through her thoughts. "But we're losing people fast." In the transmission center, Seoyeon faced a technical dilemma. Her father's notes indicated that the jammer needed to be synchronized with the exact frequency of the signal in order to reverse it. A miscalculation could amplify the effect, making the mind control permanent. "His father left a specific sequence," explained Dr. Park Miho, consulting encrypted files. "But we need the final key, something personal, something only you would know." Seoyeon's mind traveled back to her childhood memories. The visits to the temple with her father, the stories he told, the songs they sang together. Then a specific memory emerged, a tune he always whistled while working in his laboratory. Wonho, even from a distance, felt a sudden change in the city's mental energy. People's thoughts began to converge in increasingly uniform patterns. It was as if a single gigantic mind was forming, swallowing up individualities. True power lies not in control, he declared, staring at Hyunwoo, but in freedom of choice. Using his gift to the full, Wonho began to project intense memories and emotions onto everyone around him. Moments of joy, sadness, love, everything that made each person unique and irreplaceable. In the transmission tower, Seoyeon began to whistle her father's melody as she typed the sequence into the blocker. The musical notes, transformed into binary code, began to interfere with the Nexex Corporation signal. "It's working!" exclaimed Dr. Park Miho, watching the waves of energy on the monitor. "The jammer is synchronizing with the core." Hyunwoo, sensing the threat, ordered the mind-controlled security guards to break into the transmission center. But Wonho, using his special connection with Seoyeon, managed to mentally warn her of the impending danger. "On your left," she instinctively shouted to Dr. Park Miho, saving him from a security guard who emerged from the shadows. The connection with Wonho was growing stronger, transcending the normal limitations of his gift. Mayan coordinated one last assault on the remaining amplifiers. "We only have a few minutes before the signal becomes irreversible," he warned through his thoughts. In the transmission core, Seoyeon finally reached the correct sequence. The neural blocker began to pulse with a bluish light, the same color as her father's eyes. It was as if he were there, guiding her hands through the final process. "Now!" shouted Dr. Park Miho, and Seoyeon inserted the device into the center of the core. A wave of pure energy exploded from the transmission tower, spreading across Seoul like an invisible tsunami. In the streets, people began to awaken from their collective trance, confused but gradually recovering their individuality. At the LW Tower, Hyunwoo staggered, his mental control unraveling. The Nexus Corp executives, free of the signal's influence, looked at each other in shock, memories of what they had tried to do coming back like a nightmare just ended. Wonho felt his mind clearing, the thoughts around him returning to their natural patterns of chaos and individuality. Through his connection with Seoyeon, he shared a moment of pure joy and relief. In the transmission center, Seoyeon hugged the device created by her father, silent tears streaming down her face. Dr. Park Miho, exhausted but satisfied, began collecting data that would prove the criminal actions of Nexus Corporation. "Your father would be proud," he said softly. "You didn't just preserve his legacy, you completed it." The city was slowly returning to normal, but something had fundamentally changed. The experience of almost losing his individuality would leave a deep mark on Seoul's collective consciousness. Wonho, watching the sunrise through the windows of the LW Tower, realized that his gift for reading minds had been transformed. It was no longer a curse or a blessing, but a responsibility, a constant reminder of the preciousness of human individuality. And somewhere between the CEO who could read all minds except one, and the nurse whose thoughts remained a private mystery, a new story was just beginning. A story about the power of true love in a world where the truth had become everyone's most precious possession. The consequences of the incident at the transmission tower spread across Seoul like waves on a lake. In the weeks that followed, the city tried to process the extraordinary events that had almost turned its inhabitants into a single collective mind. Nexus Corp faced investigations on multiple fronts, while evidence of its illegal activities emerged daily. Wonho found Seoyeon in the garden of Seoul University Hospital, where she had returned to work. The place was quiet, with only a few patients enjoying the morning sun. Through his gift, he could sense that the minds around him had returned to their normal patterns of individual thought. "People don't remember much about what happened," she commented, observing a group of nurses chatting animatedly during their break. "Maybe it's for the best." Dr. Park Miho had turned his findings on Project Aurora into a detailed report that was now circulating among government agencies. The implications were frightening. Nexus Corp had conducted similar experiments on a smaller scale in other Asian cities. "We found records of tests in Osaka and Shanghai," Mayan revealed during a private meeting in Wonho's office. His thoughts revealed concern about the extent of the conspiracy. "It looks like Seoul was just the beginning." Hyunwoo, having recovered from the mind control, had disappeared. The thoughts Wonho picked up from the investigators suggested that he had fled to Southeast Asia. possibly carrying crucial data about the project. In the makeshift laboratory they had set up in the LW Tower, Seo-Yeon and Dr. Park Mi-ho were studying the neural blocker created by Park Jin-woo. The device had become even more valuable after they discovered that mind control technology could have spread beyond Nexus Corporation. "Your father has created something extraordinary," said Won-ho, watching Seo-Yeon work. Even without being able to read her thoughts, he could sense her determination to honor her father's legacy. Not just a shield, but a bridge to the future. In Tokyo, a special team led by Mayan was investigating connections between Nexus Corp and local conglomerates. The thoughts of Japanese executives that Won-ho picked up remotely via video conferences revealed a disturbing pattern of international collaboration. Project Aurora had sleeper cells in several cities, explained Dr. Park Mi-ho, analyzing data on his tablet, each waiting for the right moment to synchronize their activities. Seo-Yeon spent more time at the temple where they found the jammer, looking for additional clues that her father might have left. The place had become a shrine not only to their memories, but to the very idea of mental freedom that they had almost lost. During one of these visits, Won-ho accompanied her. The silence of the temple amplified the peace he felt close to her, a refuge from the constant bombardment of other people's thoughts that still tormented him. "Sometimes I wonder," she said, sitting on the temple steps, "if there are others like you, people who have been affected by the experiments in different ways." The question took him by surprise. Through his gift, he had picked up similar thoughts in other people, whispers of inexplicable abilities manifesting after exposure to Nexus Corporation technologies. At the hospital, mysterious cases began to emerge, patients reporting strange experiences, sensations of mental connection, memories that didn't belong to them. Seo-Yeon meticulously documented each occurrence, looking for patterns that could help them better understand the scope of the experiments. "The human body is more resilient than we imagine," she observed during a meeting with the research team, "but also more vulnerable to manipulations we never considered possible." Won-ho, using her influence as CEO of the LW Group, has established a foundation dedicated to studying and protecting against mind manipulation technologies. The project, named after Seo-Yeon's father, has attracted scientists and researchers from all over the world. In his apartment one evening while reviewing documents on new cases, Won-ho realized something crucial. The thoughts he was picking up from the people affected by the experiments had a unique pattern, like a digital signature, left by Nexus Corp's technology. "We need to find them all," he told Seo-Yeon. "Each person affected could be both a victim and a key to better understanding what happened." The search for answers led them to an international network of people connected by the Aurora Project. Each personal story, each unique manifestation of supernatural abilities, added a piece to the puzzle they were trying to put together. Dr. Park Mi-ho developed an identification and treatment protocol for cases related to the project. "We can't undo what has been done," he explained, "but we can help people understand and control their new abilities." For Won-ho and Seo-Yeon, each new case was a reminder of the responsibility they bore. His gift for reading minds and her natural immunity to the effects of the project made them unique, and perhaps for that very reason, key to protecting others from similar manipulations in the future. The discovery of new cases related to the Aurora Project led Won-ho and Seo-Yeon on an unexpected trip to Kyoto. A local psychiatric clinic had reported patients manifesting inexplicable abilities, similar to the effects documented in Seoul. The old hospital, located on the slopes of Mount Hai, emanated an atmosphere of mystery. Dr. Yamamoto, director of the institution, welcomed them with a mixture of relief and apprehension. Through his gift, Won-ho picked up the doctor's fragmented thoughts about experiments conducted there years before. "The first cases began about 5 years ago," explained Dr. Yamamoto, leading them through the corridors. "Patients developing telepathic abilities, precognition, even telekinesis in some cases." Seo-Yeon watched the patients carefully through the observation windows. Her experience as a nurse and the knowledge inherited from her father's research allowed her to identify subtle patterns in their behavior. "They seem to be synchronized," she murmured to Won-ho, "as if they shared a common mental frequency." In Seoul, Mayan was coordinating a parallel operation. investigators had located an abandoned Nexus Corp laboratory in the mountains of Gangwon-do. Her thoughts, which Won-ho picked up even from a distance, revealed disturbing discoveries about the extent of the experiments. "Mr. Lee," Mayan's voice echoed through the phone, "we found records of tests carried out on children. Some date back more than a decade." The revelation struck Seoyeon deeply. Her father had mentioned experiments on young people in his last notes before his death. Now the pieces were beginning to fit together in a dark way. In the Zen garden of the clinic, a young patient called Sakura approached them. Her movements were graceful, almost ethereal, and her eyes carried a wisdom beyond her years. "You hear them too, don't you?" she asked Won-ho directly. The thoughts of others like waves on an endless ocean. Through her gift, Won-ho realized that Sakura possessed an ability similar to his own, but with one crucial difference: she could not only read, but influence the thoughts of others. Dr. Park Mi-ho, analyzing the data sent from Seoul, made an important connection. The experiments in Kyoto were conducted simultaneously with the initial tests of Project Aurora, he explained via a video call. They were looking for different manifestations of the same phenomenon. At night, in the hotel in Kyoto, Won-ho and Seoyeon reviewed the information they had collected. Her proximity remained the only moment of true mental silence he experienced, a refuge from the constant whirlwind of other people's thoughts. "My father knew," said Seoyeon softly, studying old photographs of the laboratory in Gangwon-do. "He tried to stop it years before he developed the blocker." An alert on their cell phones interrupted the conversation. Hyun-woo had been located in Bangkok, apparently trying to establish contact with former Project Aurora cells in Southeast Asia. "He's trying to rebuild the network," concluded Won-ho, picking up scattered thoughts from contacts in Thailand, but with a different approach. The next day, returning to the clinic, they found Sakura in a state of agitation. Through her, they discovered that other patients with similar abilities were scattered all over Asia, an involuntary network of individuals modified by Nexus Corp's experiments. "We are like knots in an invisible web," Sakura explained, her fingers tracing patterns in the air, each affected in a unique way, but all connected in some way. Dr. Yamamoto revealed that he had kept detailed records of each case, hiding them from Nexus Corporation. His thoughts, which Won-ho picked up clearly now, showed a man tormented by the guilt of having initially taken part in the experiments. "We thought we were helping the evolution of the human mind," he confessed. "But we created something we couldn't control." On his laptop, Seoyeon mapped out each new case discovered, creating a complex network of connections between the different manifestations of abilities. The pattern that emerged was startling. Project Aurora had affected far more people than they had initially imagined. "Each person is like a unique frequency," she observed, studying the data. "But together, they form a symphony that could fundamentally change human consciousness." Won-ho, watching her work, felt a sudden change in his own gift. The thoughts he picked up seemed sharper, more organized, as if his power was evolving in response to his discoveries. "We're not just finding victims," he said, finally understanding. "We're discovering a new form of human existence." Night fell over Kyoto, its ancient lights mixing with modern neon. At the top of the hotel, Won-ho and Seoyeon gazed out over the city, each lost in their own thoughts about the future that lay before them. The sound of their breathing mingled with the distant murmur of the city, creating a unique melody that seemed to echo the complexity of their discoveries. Somewhere between the silence and the chaos, between the supernatural gift and human understanding, a new truth was beginning to emerge. Autumn in Seoul painted the streets in golden hues as Won-ho watched the city from his office in the LW Tower. 6 months had passed since the events in Kyoto, and the network of people affected by Project Aurora continued to grow. His gift had evolved, allowing him not only to read thoughts, but also to establish deeper connections with other bearers of similar abilities. Seoyeon entered the office carrying new reports from the research center they had established. His presence was still the only moment of true mental silence for Won-ho, a paradox that had become even more significant with his recent discoveries. "We found 3 more cases in Taipei," she said, spreading documents out on the table. "They all display unique variations of telepathic abilities." Dr. Park Mi-ho, via video conference, supplemented the information. "Most of those affected demonstrate a neural connection similar to yours, Mr. Lee." but each manifests the gift differently. The thoughts of Mayan, who was working downstairs, reached Wonho urgently. Hyunwoo has been spotted in Singapore. He's recruiting people affected by the project. The news didn't surprise Wonho. Through the network of consciousnesses he could now access, he had sensed suspicious movements in Southeast Asia. His cousin was building something, a new version of the project that had failed in Seoul. Sakura, who had been brought from Kyoto to help with the research, entered the room. Her ability to influence thoughts had proved invaluable in protecting others affected by the project. "They're scared," she said, referring to the new cases discovered, "but also hopeful. For the first time, they are not alone." At the Park Jin-woo Foundation's main laboratory, scientists are working tirelessly to understand the nature of the neural mutations caused by Project Aurora. The blocker created by Seoyeon's father had become the basis for new mental protection technologies. "The changes are permanent," explained Dr. Park Mi-ho, analyzing brain scans, "but they can be directed to benefit humanity, not control it." Seoyeon spent more time at the temple where it all began, trying to better understand her father's legacy. The letters she found revealed that he had foreseen not only the dangers of the project, but also its transformative potential. He believed that the evolution of human consciousness was inevitable, she told Wonho during one of their quiet moments together. But it should happen naturally, not through forced manipulation. Nexus Corp, although officially dissolved after the scandals, had left seeds planted in several countries. Each new discovery revealed deeper ramifications of the original project. On a particularly difficult night, when the city's thoughts seemed more chaotic than usual, Wonho found Seoyeon in the hospital garden. She was finishing her shift, still devoting part of her time to the regular patients. "How do you maintain your humanity in the midst of all this?" he asked, admiring her ability to balance the extraordinary with the everyday. "Maybe that's why you can't read my thoughts," she replied with a soft smile. "Some things need to remain mysterious to retain their beauty." An alert on their cell phones interrupted the moment. Hyunwoo had been tracked down, this time in Hong Kong. Security camera footage showed him meeting with former Nexus Corporation scientists. "He's trying to complete what we started," thought Yuri, who was now collaborating with them after his redemption, but in an even more dangerous way. The Park Jin-woo Foundation had become a beacon of hope for people all over Asia. As well as research and protection, it offered a safe space for those who discovered they possessed extraordinary abilities. "Every person we help is a victory over what Nexus Corp tried to do," observed Sakura. Her gift now focused on helping others to control their abilities. At the end of that day, as night fell over Seoul, Wonho and Seoyeon were once again at the top of the LW Tower. The city sparkled below them, millions of minds connected in an invisible dance that only he could perceive. "The gift I received," he said, breaking the contemplative silence, "wasn't a curse as I first thought. It was an awakening." Seoyeon gently touched his hand, and at that moment, something extraordinary happened. For the first time, Wonho caught a glimpse of her thoughts, not as an invasion, but as a willingly shared gift. Some mysteries are meant to be unraveled slowly, she thought, allowing him to feel the love that had grown between them, pure and true as it had always been. The future still held challenges, Hyunwoo and his ambitions, new cases to protect, the constant balance between power and responsibility. But now they had something stronger than any supernatural ability, a connection forged through trust, understanding, and true love. The story of a CEO who could read minds and a nurse whose thoughts were a mystery had turned into something bigger. It was a testament to the power of human individuality, the strength of genuine love, and the eternal battle between control and freedom. As the lights of Seoul danced in the night, Wonho and Seoyeon stood together, silently sharing a moment that transcended words and thoughts. True power, after all, lay not in reading minds or controlling consciences, but in the ability to choose to love and trust, even in a world full of uncertainty.